So this week, as I said to begin the service, is Shabbat Chazon. It's called Shabbat Chazon because the first words of the Haftarah for tomorrow from the book of Isaiah is Chazon Yeshayahu, the vision of Isaiah. Now, Isaiah is an interesting prophet because the other prophets, some of our other prophets, have some pretty bizarre visions that we're very well familiar with. I mean, think of Ezekiel and the chariot that goes off into the sky with sparks and things coming from the wheels. That's a vision. It's one. There's been a lot of discussion about where Yechezkel got the ability to see such a thing, but Isaiah was more down to earth. His visions were not spectacular or supernatural. And in the Haftarah, it echoes what happens in the Torah portion this week of Devarim, which we also always read on this Shabbat before Tisha B'Av, the third Shabbat before Tisha B'Av, because Devarim is the beginning of the book of Deuteronomy, the last book of the Bible. And Moses starts in this last book looking back on the journey that the Israelites had taken. And this season of mourning and of being aware of destruction is a time of our looking back and of looking at mistakes in our history, in our world, in our lives. And in some ways, it's a profound preparation for the work we do on the Days of Awe. But while the Days of Awe tends to focus, the liturgy very much focuses on us as a plural, as a community, and it insists that we do personal cheshbon hanefesh. Tisha B'Av is very much focused on some of the communal sins we have committed. Now, that's an interesting thing because, of course, we never say that Jews actually destroyed the temple, but the commentaries are clear. When we focus on the destruction of both of the temples, and we talk about those who did the destroying, whether they were the Babylonians or the Romans, over and over the prophets say that the destruction at the hands of the Babylonians or the Romans, they were simply acting as agents of God. Now that's a very intense thing to say because we live in a culture where we don't blame the victim, right? If we say, if we have suffered, it can never be, we have to be very careful about if we say it's our fault. But the prophets and the Chazon Yeshayahu, which is so powerful that we'll read tomorrow, lists all the things that we have done wrong. And many of them are profoundly communal. In the Haftarah of tomorrow, some of the things that he points out include the corruption of the rulers, creating a society in which the rich are rewarded and the poor suffer. Yeshayahu says that if we continue to create those kinds of societies, all will be destroyed. So when the prophets looked at the destruction of those temples so long ago, and it seems so far away, and after all, who cares that temples that killed animals for sacrifice were destroyed? The deeper message is that those temples, those places of holiness for the ancient ancestors of us all, were destroyed because the societies had become sick. They had lost a sense of justice. The poor were neglected and the rich were rewarded. Does this sound familiar? Judges did not judge with justice. Shabbat Chazon. So what is the vision of Shabbat Chazon? Some have said that the Chazon, the vision of Isaiah that we focus on, is this vision of what will destroy our societies. And we start by looking back in all the places that we as Jews or Israelites, before we were even identified as Jews, have suffered, and understand that we might have had a role to play in it. Oy Gewalt, what does that mean? It means that we have agency as well. It's a scary thing to think about that concept of the power that we've had to create a world in which innocent people will suffer. One way to look at this, and this is something I think we've talked about a lot in the Psalms class and are very significant for the period of time of Tisha B'Av. Let's try and come up with language that helps us as modern people understand what this might mean. So imagine that when we talk about the holiness in the world, when we're talking about goodness in the world, and we're talking about and contrasting it with badness or evil, let's imagine that goodness means when we do things which will increase the holiness in our world, and Drashah or evil or evildoers, that are those language found throughout our holy texts, are those who decrease, take away holiness from the universe. So the righteous are those who increase holiness, and those who are evil are those who decrease holiness. So imagine on Tisha B'Av, we are looking right into the belly of the beast and looking deeply at the place in the universe in which holiness is sucked out and evil has room to grow. And if we act in the world to increase holiness, there's less and less room for evil, and holiness will increase. So Tisha B'Av in this season of these 3 weeks is all about feeling the suffering that those who are increasing, or those who are decreasing holiness are winning. And we have had a hand in that. Now, if you think about that, wouldn't you want to rip your clothes and fast and chant and feel deep sorrow? So let me give a modern example so we can understand. So when we talk about police brutality and racism, it might be possible to stand back and say, I'm not responsible for what happened to George Floyd. I wasn't there in that location on that street. I wasn't the person putting my knee on the back of his neck. So I'll feel smug. I'll identify the evil in the world as something out there. Or, and this is what Tisha B'Av demands of us, that we look within and we say, hold on, what are the ways that I have decreased holiness in the world enough that it has created room for evil to exist? What ways have I created a society or contributed to a society in which somehow somebody with darker skin is less valued than somebody with lighter skin? In what ways have I contributed to a society in which those who have less are oppressed, those who are poor are diminished in our society? It's easy for us to stand back and say, I haven't done the actual deed. But Tisha B'Av says we all contribute to a society in which destruction and evil takes place. And that is what we are mourning. That is what we are crying over. That is what we are so deeply sad about in the season of Tisha B'Av. We open our eyes enough to see that we have contributed to the decrease of holiness in the world enough so that the presence of evil can prosper. That is a heavy burden to carry, but there is deep and meaningful truth in it. And we have to do tshuva for the ways we personally and communally have contributed. In what ways have our people, in what ways have our Jewish people, in what way, whatever communities you belong in, have contributed to decreasing holiness enough? It's not enough to say, I don't do evil every single day. The question is, what amount of good do we do? So these 3 weeks are focused in this deep and painful way on the destructions in the world. And our Talmud says the temple was destroyed because of hatred. It doesn't say it was destroyed because the Romans were a superior military force. Of course they were. But hatred is what seeps into the foundation of society and makes it so weak so that something can come along and blow the strongest walls down. So this is the sadness of Psalm 137. This is the sadness of Tisha B'Av and of the words of Eicha and of Isaiah and those Psalms of Lamentations. We open our eyes and we look and we're horrified. But Eicha does end with Nechemta, because we then start the 7 weeks towards Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, when we can do deep tshuva. And God believes that each of us can return. And God believes that each of us can do good. And each of us can be agents of goodness and decency. And each of us can be the hands that bring holiness into the world so that the forces of evil are pushed out. This psalm of Psalm 137 is the psalm of Tisha B'Av. We sat by the waters of Babylon, and we wept when we remembered Zion. Upon the bending willow, there we hung our harps. For in our exile, we were forced to utter words of home. Sing for us songs of Zion. But how could we sing songs on strangers' soil? If I forget you, Jerusalem, let my right hand forget its cunning. Let my tongue lock my mouth mute. If I forget to turn back to you, if I lose my way and wander off, source of my heart's comfort, reward justly all that long to see her. O daughters, it will be a relief when your dark sprouts and black flowers for what you have done. We sat by the waters of Babylon and we wept.